right, last video. I think this is the most little short videos I have for any of these lectures, but there's a lot to cover with colonial women. So the very last thing you have here is 17th century housewifery and childbirth. And the key takeaway for these terms is that, women's lives look really different on the surface if they settled in Virginia or if they settled in Massachusetts, if they settled in the South versus if they settled in the North. There's that. Sexual disparity in the South. There's that high death rate in the South. So it looks a little different. But ultimately, women's day-to-day lives, pretty much the same, right? Women are supposed to be wives and they're supposed to be mothers. And so that's what this last term is just trying to get you to think about. And women could also, in housewifery, they could also, again, maybe find some agency. You really needed, in the colonial period, you have to have two people to make that farm work. So, if you think about just like a day, an average day, and you saw some of this in the Martha Ballard video that you started off with. Let's say you're going to have chicken. Well, you have to chop the wood to get the fire to go. You have to go get the chicken. You have to, wring the chicken's neck. You have to pluck the feathers. There's all of this, and that's just like one meal. And if you want to see in the evening, you have to have made candles. Candles can take the whole day to make. You have to make clothes, and not just like, that you don't buy ready-made fabric. You have to like shear the sheep and get the wool and put it on a loom, and all of these things. It's hours and hours and hours. And so oftentimes what women did is they shared that labor. One woman would make the candles and she'd make extra candles. Another woman would make the butter and she'd make extra butter. And another woman would make, the soap and she'd make extra soap. And then the women would share the, that surplus so that they weren't having to make all of those things individually. So that's a key part of this, is that it's a very homosocial world in which you very much have a community of women working together to sustain themselves. And then also the mutual respect that husbands would have for wives, because husbands realize they cannot make this farm work without the support of a wife. This is why the poem you have before the birth of one of her children by Anne Bradstreet, she's writing, she suspects perhaps that she's probably going to die, because that's a real possibility for women who are pregnant. And she knows her husband will remarry because he's going to have to. They have half a dozen kids and they have this whole farm to manage. So there is this mutual respect. And there's this one really great letter from this one man to it's an exchange between these two men. And one man was getting ready to start a new venture. And he said, well, maybe I'll borrow some money from my wife. She keeps chickens. Maybe she'd sell the excess to like the local shop. Now remember, with coverture, he owns that money is his. Like, no matter if it's her labor, right? When she's married to him, all of her wages, all of her property belongs to him. And so the friend said, well, you don't have to ask her, like, to borrow the money, like it's yours. And he replied, no. The turkey and fowl, that they are hers. Because she has been and she is a good wife to me. So he is predicated on her being a good wife, but he acknowledged that the significance of that role, and he recognized that that was necessary. Now the key thing for childbirth again is the mutual world that is created among women. It's truly a female-centered world. When a woman would go into labor, the only job of a man was to go get all the other women in the community, and they'd all gather at the woman's house, and they would assist with the birth of a child. And then oftentimes a woman would have what was called her laying-in period, where after, if she survived the birth of her child, after the baby was born, she'd have it just kind of depended on her status, but she'd have a day or maybe several days to literally lay in and heal and recover. And the other women in the community would then ensure that her children were fed, the house was running. And of course, the reason the women would do this for her is because, right, they're going to be on the other side of that within the next year or so, because women are having on average in colonial New England 6 to 8 kids, and some of them considerably more. You know, you mentioned Dan Hutchinson. So again, the key takeaway with childbirth is, like housewifery, is the ways in which that is very much a female world, and a world in which, again, there's often that mutual respect. All right, if you've got any questions, you can leave this in the discussion board. Take care.